After being given a second chance at life, the man's initial action was to undo every skill he had acquired in his previous class. Due to acquiring a god-level enhancement called Mirror World, he now possessed the ability to reverse the outcome of any skill he used. During that era, portals between dimensions silently appeared throughout, releasing endless hordes of monsters that swept across the land, leaving destruction in their wake. Whenever a human encountered a rift, they would unlock an enigmatic ability referred to as a class. After that turning point, people depended on powerful groups of class holders to defend themselves. Stood out as one of the earliest individuals to awaken these unique abilities. He gathered his own team, battled through many dangerous rifts, and eventually guided his followers to victory over an SSS-level dungeon, the most perilous challenge anyone had ever faced. Before he could fully savor his triumph, treachery shattered the moment. The Empire's royal family, threatened by his growing influence, allowed fear to take root in their hearts. Those who possessed powerful classes held the ability to reshape the very structure of society. Shay, whose abilities had grown far beyond the SSS tier, was recognized as the most threatening anomaly among them all. Was the trusted ally who had stood by his side through numerous perilous encounters. Poison had been stealthily hidden within his armor, turning it into a silent threat. As his teammates began to fall, her icy words lingered in his mind, chilling him even more. Began to lose awareness as her senses faded away. As he hovered on the edge of death, his secret ability, Mirror World, suddenly activated. His spirit drifted down to the bottom of the river.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork, and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Webtoon Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.
He remained in a deep slumber that lasted for 66 years. One day, a group of thugs attacked a young boy and left him hanging from a tree by the riverbank. In the end, the group decided to toss the boy into the flowing river. The boy wondered why he was always the target of bullies, his deep-seated resentment echoing silently beneath the surface of the water. A wave of resentment stirred something deep within, rousing the dormant soul below. In that fleeting moment, Yin Shei's spirit merged seamlessly with the boy's body. A burst of dazzling light exploded across the river. The thugs, gripped by fear, scattered in all directions when a mysterious rift started to open before them, its power clearly surpassing anything they could hope to control. George, the boy whom the group had compelled to lead them, was the only one who paused. With his jaw tightened in determination, he spun around and made an attempt to rescue him. By the time he arrived at the water's edge, the rift stood complete, and from its depths a horde of minor wraiths poured out. At the same moment, opened his eyes, and without thinking, his body reacted by attempting to launch a deadly attack. A shimmering green glow began to fall from the sky. Without warning, the health bars above the attacking monster surged back to full. George stood motionless, unable to believe what he was seeing. He wondered if the man before him had lost his mind, because, against all odds, the stranger was actually helping the wounded. Lowered his gaze to the system panel, feeling a wave of disappointment wash over him. The display revealed his character details. His name was, his race identified as human, and his current level stood at 5. His class was set as Bard. The panel listed his health points at 430 out of a possible 480, with 120 as his mana points. Stamina showed a value of 8, matching both his spirit and strength stats. Defense was recorded at 6, as were agility points. His critical hit rate remained a mere 0.5%, and his mana regeneration measured just 1 per interval. Finally, the screen showed his skill experience as 0 out of 1200, reaffirming his class as. He stopped abruptly as the realization struck him. He was no longer in his own body. Typically, whenever someone encountered a rift, a system would automatically attach itself to them and assign a random starting class that could not be altered. Starting from that point, individuals could enhance their abilities by fighting in dungeons, acquiring skills that matched their chosen class. In the life he had lived before, had mastered the warrior path, refining his attributes until they reached their peak. Just before he died, appeared to trigger a special ability known as mirror inversion. again. Afterward, his awareness remained confined inside the world of mirrors, unable to escape, until the piercing cry of a boy on the brink of death finally reached him. He came to understand that he had likely inhabited the boy's body in order to give someone else a second chance at life. The boy's frail body lacked the strength to face even the weakest of monsters. These small creatures easily overpowered him, and he stood no chance of outrunning them due to their swift movements. Making things even more difficult, he found that every one of his abilities failed him. He found himself assigned to the weakest support class, known as Bard, a role that specialized only in boosting allies and restoring their health. During battles, the class fell short compared to all other fighting types, which probably explained why the boy often faced bullying and exclusion. Shay looked back at the system panel, wondering if testing out that particular skill would reveal its effects. Uncertain about how to proceed, he hurled the spell in the direction of a monster that stood close by. The system then himmed that mirror world had been activated on the creature known as Lesser Wraith B. The system refused to activate, indicating that the necessary conditions had not been fulfilled. A frown creased his face as he wondered if his current level was insufficient. He wondered if a shiny surface was necessary, just as he had used the lake earlier. Once more, he focused his effort, aiming at a puddle that captured the sky's reflection. This time, there was no message indicating failure. Instead, the only issue was that the activation level was too low. Just as he had anticipated, the phenomenon of mirror inversion would only occur if there was a surface resembling a mirror present. Since gaining a level was impossible at the moment, he shifted his focus to a new objective, the creature's blade. He mentally commanded the system to activate Mirror World, this time targeting the Wraith's cleaver. The message echoed once more, indicating that the operation could not be completed due to an inadequate level. Close by, George yelled in frustration, urging others to stop spending precious moments on ineffective support spells, as his strength to hold back their opponents was quickly fading. At that moment, a dazzling beam of light shot up from the earth. A towering silhouette gradually emerged, revealing itself as an elite creature of immense power. It was the dystrophic overlord, classified as a level 10 entity. This demon, forged from the lingering hatred of a long-lost war zone, belonged to the race. Its attributes were formidable: 1,680 health points, 100 mana points, 28 stamina, 5 spirit, 27 strength, 20 defense, and 10 agility. George's complexion drained of color as the realization struck him. In his mind, defeat seemed certain, knowing that only a fighter of level 10 or higher could hope to defeat the creature before them. Fear gripped him as he silently concluded they had no chance of survival. At that moment, a sudden idea flashed through Shi's mind, leading him to direct mirror inversion toward the barrier George had created. Ding was unable to reverse the effects of any other skill. He realized right away that the skill was limited to affecting only himself. He chose to turn the power inward, wondering what might happen if he reversed the effects of his own ability. The skill came to life, granting mastery over vines within the mirrored realm, and the inversion was achieved without fail. A sharp chime signaled the transformation of the skill, causing an eruption of tangled, spiked vines from the earth. The vines writhed aggressively, shooting skyward to form a barrier that halted the monster's approach. Something unexpected occurred at that moment. The leading elite monster's eyes abruptly glowed a vivid red. The creature let out an enraged bellow as it whipped around, unleashing its claws on one of its fellow demons and ripping it to pieces within moments. George remained rooted to the spot, completely stunned by what he witnessed. Just minutes earlier had seemed like nothing more than dead weight. Now, against all odds, the monsters were viciously attacking one another. Within moments, the rift erupted with deafening roars and violent destruction. Yet Yin-Shay experienced only a surge of excitement. The mysterious truth behind mirror inversion became clear to him. The ability had entirely flipped the outcome of his power. Where his initial skill, vine control, would merely conjure vines to hold and possibly paralyze opponents, the inverted version transformed into chaos thorns, which sent foes spiraling into insanity. This astonishing force belonged solely to the mirror world. A subtle smile formed on his face as he considered the irony that support spells, once deemed worthless, could turn into powerful tools of destruction when reversed. A chilling light flickered in his gaze. He refused to let his support class define him. With the power of the mirror world at his command, he planned to destroy every obstacle in his path. The dungeon and those who had turned against him would all face his wrath. Revenge would come, and it would be paid in blood. He focused on his fundamental ability, Blade Strike, and triggered the inversion technique. The system responded, announcing that the reverse skill had been enabled and the trick blade effect was now active. With every use of mana, his attack strength would climb by 10%. The skill required 40 mana to activate and would remain effective for a full minute. Crouched to retrieve a weapon left behind by a defeated monster, a confident smirk spreading across his face. He realized that every skill the monster had used now granted him an additional 10% boost to his attack power. This meant that every skill he used would continue to build up damage without stopping. While the elite monsters relentlessly fought among themselves, he quietly gathered the experience points from their battles, steadily increasing his level over and over. This created a perfect loop of continuous advancement. Whenever he gained a new level, his mana would immediately be restored to its maximum amount. As soon as the opportunity arose, unleashed Chaos Thorns again. At that instant, the system that's effect had been activated, granting a 10% increase in attack power. Just 2.5 minutes later, his strength had surged, reaching 120% over twice what it had been before. Brought down his blade in a powerful arc, slicing straight through the elite monster and ending its life in an instant. George stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock, unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. He questioned inwardly what sort of ability could possibly explain this. The idea that this was the same who had always been the target of bullies seemed impossible to him. The spectacle unfolding before him appeared far beyond what a mere level 5 could accomplish. The earth shook without warning as cracks snaked across its surface. With a deafening crash, an enormous claw erupted from beneath the ground. A system notification announced the arrival of the dungeon's final boss, Battlefield Chimera. This creature, known as Battlefield Chimera, stood at level 21. It was described as the highest-ranking demon, formed from the leftover hatred of a war-torn land from long ago. Classified as a wrath demon, its stats included 10,020 health points, 300 magic points, 167 stamina, 15 spirit, 180 strength, 80 defense, and 19 agility. Yin Chai's brow furrowed in surprise at the discovery. A hidden level within a freshly generated random dungeon was highly unusual. Facing a level 21 boss in such a setting was far from ordinary. He chose to see how strong it was. When he cast his spell, the system hymned that Chaos Thorns had been activated against the Battlefield Chimera. The system indicated that the attempt had not succeeded, revealing that the target could not be affected by confusion. In a split second, George raised his shield and jumped in front of Yin, positioning himself as a protective barrier. Shay felt a painful constriction in his chest at the sight before him, as memories of his former companion, Joe, abruptly surfaced in his mind. In those days, the man would unfailingly place himself between danger and the boy, shielding him with unwavering resolve. George's shield offered little protection. The Chimera's powerful attack crashed into him with the force of a falling star, sending him flying dozens of meters through the air. The impact sent him crashing to the earth, crimson drops scattering over the dusty ground. Hurried to the scene and attempted to use his heal ability, but quickly discovered its ineffectiveness. The spell consumed all of his mana, yet managed to recover only a tiny fraction of health. He muttered under his breath about how ineffective Bard's healing was. Then, he asked if there were any potions available. After learning there was only one left, he sighed in frustration. He took a deep breath, reassuring himself that he would complete the task for George within the next minute. His gaze grew intense while he sprinted ahead, collecting experience points from the fallen elite enemies. Just moments before his effect ended, he reached a new level, causing his mana to be completely replenished. He quickly figured out that conquering a level 21 boss would require his attack power to be increased by at least 400%. Remained active for just 1 minute. To achieve the necessary enhancement, he would have to use Chaos Thorns 40 times in less than 50 seconds. Wasted no time, unleashing a fresh surge of magic and layering enhancement spells in quick succession. In just a few seconds, his level quickly increased to 12. His offensive strength soared, exceeding 510%. He sprang upward with a thunderous shout, his sword shining brilliantly as it arced through the air, cutting straight through the Chimera's enormous claw. With both arms crossed, he sent out a brilliant, crisscrossing slash that sliced deeply into the creature's back. The Chimera let out a pained roar, its body trembling before it crashed heavily onto the ground. George stood in place, unable to move, his eyes opened wide in disbelief as the thought crossed his mind that this moment had to be a dream. A lone bard who had reached level 5 managed to defeat the most powerful wrath demon in the dungeon all by himself, conquering the final boss without any help. George hurried over too, his mind still spinning from the shocking scene he had just observed. He struggled to believe what he was seeing. Was this truly before him? George couldn't help but wonder how had managed to gain such incredible strength so suddenly. Yin chose not to respond right away. Instead, he stared intently at the young man, shifting the conversation by questioning him about his connection to Joe. George responded by revealing that Joe was actually his great-grandfather. Junkie, the great-grandfather, stood there. His thoughts quivered with uncertainty. He remembered how Roey had killed every one of his allies in the past. Yet a sliver of doubt crept in. Was it possible that a few had managed to escape? The conceited youngster from long ago had, in fact, gone on to leave descendants behind. Fixed his gaze on George, hesitating as he prepared to inquire about George's great-grandfather. George interrupted before the other person could continue, his voice gentle as he lowered his head. He made it clear that this wasn't the right moment for such a conversation, and assured the other person that refusing to answer his questions was acceptable. However, he quietly pleaded not to be embarrassed in this way. After a moment of silence, George softly observed that the other person had been concealing their abilities all along. He shifted the conversation, insisting that they needed to return to school. That afternoon, a trip to the Modern History Museum was scheduled, and he pointed out that their absence would be noticed if they didn't show up. Yin paused briefly before giving a small nod, deciding it was wiser to avoid drawing attention to himself. He understood that the fewer questions George asked, the more secure his disguise would be. He considered the Modern History Museum, reasoning that if his assumptions were correct, it would contain documentation of all events that took place following his demise. As strolled along the bustling street, awe filled him at the transformed world around him. Everything seemed unrecognizable compared to what he once knew. After spending so many years asleep, he was amazed to see that society now fueled their vehicles with resources gathered from dungeons. He observed various other creations as well, noticing that while some were strange and new to him, others reminded him uncannily of objects he had encountered before inside rifts. Something in particular left him confused. Usually, only items that monsters dropped as loot could be taken out of a rift. The old chimera ring, now casting a soft glow, rested on his finger. Objects such as equipment and skill manuals could be stored in a person's inventory, allowing class holders to exchange goods with each other. Everything that couldn't be stored in an inventory was supposed to disappear along with the dungeon after the boss was defeated. Yet, despite this, a heavy concentration of rift energy still lingered in the air. Furrowed his brow, his mind racing with questions about what might have transpired following his own demise. Perhaps even a revolution had taken place. Soon, he arrived at the impressive entrance of the Modern History Museum, his silhouette coming into view against the grand gates. As the instructor faced the museum's entrance and launched into his address, a chill swept through Yinshe. Looming overhead was an enormous sculpture depicting the kingdom's highest authority, king honored throughout the land as the hero who had brought an end to the dungeon disaster. The instructor's voice carried throughout the plaza, capturing everyone's attention. He reminded the group that this location was likely familiar to many of them, as it had been where the famous Rebellion War had taken place more than half a century earlier. During that era, people endured immense hardship as dungeons invaded their world. The emergence of a fearsome SSS-level dungeon sent waves of terror sweeping across every nation. King took command of the royal army and marched them into the heart of battle. Although many lives were lost, he succeeded in overcoming the dreaded nightmare dungeon and brought peace back to the land. Following the glorious triumph, someone within the ranks revealed his true colors, turning his back on the king he once loyally served. The name of this betrayer would soon be known. The instructor's voice grew firmer as he called out's name. Once he had enjoyed the king's confidence, but he turned his back on both the throne and the nation. Throughout the ages, his name became synonymous with unforgivable betrayal. Despite being weighed down by sorrow, the youthful prince found the strength to stand once more, taking command at the forefront of the effort to restore the empire. With help from the valiant hero Dane, he defeated the uprising and brought peace back to the land. Every sentence spoken felt like a knife piercing Kai's heart. Anger surged within him, making his hands shake uncontrollably. The man named Ro, infamous for mercilessly killing Kai's comrades, was now celebrated by all as a savior and honored leader. Meanwhile, Kai, the real champion who had overcome the SSS dungeon, carried the permanent mark of a traitor. Memories of their victory haunted him, tangled with a bitter accusation that he was the one who had betrayed them. His fists tightened with such force that his knuckles blanched, revealing the depth of his anguish. A persistent unease lingered within him. The name Ding echoed in his mind, unfamiliar and out of place among the original raiders. He couldn't shake the question, who was this mysterious new hero? At that moment, a taunting voice he recognized echoed from behind. The speaker ridiculed, calling him worthless and expressing disbelief that he had survived, especially after being pulled into the recent rift. The speaker turned out to be Ding, the gang leader who had caused trouble before. He approached confidently with his group, a sly smile on his face. Rumor had it the new rift had already been dealt with, likely by a skilled expert lending a hand. It seemed to Ding that these two had simply benefited from good fortune. Nearby, a group of students started to form, whispering to each other in astonishment as they realized that a new dungeon had been explored and completed. A surge of disbelief washed over the character as they realized the situation was real and unfolding before their eyes. Ding rested his hand on George's shoulder, a sly grin spreading across his face. He marveled at George's fortune, admitting he hadn't expected George to make it out alive. His voice grew sharper and his gaze became more intense. He reminded her that they had nearly caused her death earlier and wanted to know what she intended to do to repay them for that. George lost control of his anger, blaming the others for forcing them into the situation. He decided he would report what had happened, accusing them of endangering both him and with their reckless actions. Ding abruptly seized George by the head, a mocking grin spreading across his face. He wondered aloud, his tone dripping with sarcasm, what thoughts could possibly be running through George's mind. To Ding, it was obvious that George still failed to understand what kind of trouble he was in. He gestured toward the nearby statue, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he urged the others to look closely. The figure of a supposed traitor lay pinned beneath the hero's boot, and he revealed with a smirk that this disgraced man was none other than Joe, their revered great-grandfather. The speaker questioned whether, given their lineage as a traitor's descendant, anyone would truly offer assistance. Ding's voice rose above the crowd as he declared that he would not tolerate anyone speaking ill of his great-grandfather. Ding. The audience burst into excitement without hesitation. Someone in the crowd pointed out that Dean, celebrated across the nation, had been the one to end the rebellion. Others quickly reminded everyone that George was descended from Joe, the infamous traitor. The group expressed outrage at George for daring to respond, recalling how his grandfather had caused so much suffering. They insisted that if Dean hadn't intervened, many more lives would have been lost. In the midst of the turmoil, a teacher intervened. The teacher urged George to remain composed, reminding him of their fairness and promising to speak on his behalf. The teacher's expression grew stern as she instructed the student to offer an apology to Ding. The hero had shown mercy to their family in the past, so they were expected to feel gratitude instead of showing disrespect. Frustration flickered in George's eyes, and his voice quivered as he struggled to keep his composure. Ding, feeling confident, flashed a smug grin and ruffled George's hair. He believed that if he decided to attack George on the spot, nobody would intervene. In his mind, no one would ever defend the child of a traitor. He moved in, his face twisted into a sneer, and let his contempt show as he insulted her, declaring that she was an unwanted stray, the lowest and most repulsive sort. At the very moment his fist began to rise, a swift streak darted through the air, immediately accompanied by a loud snap when a powerful kick landed directly on Ding's face. Ding crashed to the ground with a heavy thump, his face hitting the floor and embarrassment washing over him. Yin remained rooted to the spot, his eyes as frigid as winter frost. With a chilling tone, he questioned whether the hero families ever took the time to teach their spoiled children any manners. The audience burst into chaos, stunned by Yin's actions. Whispers of disbelief spread rapidly as onlookers questioned his sanity and wondered how he could have the audacity to hit the child of a celebrated hero where everyone could see. He was just a level 5 support, yet he showed no fear of being attacked and possibly killed. Ding sprang to his feet, his anger clear as he gestured sharply for his soldiers to rush forward. However, it seemed as if they moved at a snail's pace. He darted through the crowd with the speed of a gust, delivering a single precise blow to each attacker, and within moments, every thug lay sprawled on the ground. At last, he seized hold of Ding and unleashed a relentless barrage of punches, each strike pouring down as steadily as a heavy rainstorm. Ding's eyes burned red with anger as he unleashed a surge of fury, causing his attack strength to rise by a quarter. The sting of humiliation from someone labeled worthless was almost too much for him to accept. Driven by desperation, he reached for his weapon, the hammer, and hurled it toward, channeling every ounce of his strength into the powerful swing. Moved swiftly to the side, easily avoiding the forceful attack. A sharp, forceful blow struck Ding directly on the jaw, delivering a precise impact. Ding accomplished what no one thought could be done, but then he fell to the ground, losing consciousness. Just then, the teacher regained focus, his eyes burning with intensity. He believed it was disgraceful to speak ill of a hero, and now witnessing someone attacking a hero's descendant in front of everyone left him furious. Without hesitation, he loudly condemned the behavior, finding it absolutely unacceptable. He slowly pulled out his baton, his face set with intense determination. On the other hand, casually waved his hand, allowing the old ring on his finger to catch the light and draw attention. Without warning, an enormous purple shape appeared out of thin air. As the teacher brought down his baton on the figure, the weapon broke apart on impact. Shock washed over his features, leaving him pale. He wondered in disbelief what sort of gear could possibly withstand an attack like his. Responded with a calm demeanor, questioning the fairness of someone who accepted Ding's version of events without hesitation and wondering aloud if they were simply trying to please the influential hero families. The teacher struggled to maintain a composed demeanor after the student's comments unsettled him. He assured the class that he would look into the matter, though uncertainty flashed briefly across his face. Despite his promise, confusion lingered as he puzzled over where gear had come from, quietly questioning if someone powerful was supporting the student. Looked down at the worn chimera ancient ring encircling his finger. He remembered earning it as a rare reward from defeating a level 21 lord. However, he knew this treasured item stood little chance against the power of a level 35 instructor. He pivoted to exit, declaring his acceptance of expulsion from the museum as his penalty. With those words, he and George turned and left, leaving the onlookers stunned. Everyone wondered if this could truly be the same she they once thought of as worthless. He had faced the teacher without any sign sign of fear, stood outside the museum, his face clouding with worry. Not long ago, Joe Bin had fought by his side, but now both were branded as traitors. He realized that almost none of his former companions had made it through. He glanced over at George and confessed that history was not his strong suit. Hoping for help, he asked George to explain who Dane was. George, filled with excitement, recounted how word had spread about Ding discovering betrayal and setting up an ambush near the SSS-level rift, ultimately playing a key role in stopping the uprising. It was also believed that Dean had put a stop to the disastrous events that once plagued. George gestured toward the statue's sword, noting that rumors claimed this very weapon, a remarkable gray blade, had once been used to execute the infamous traitor. Clenched his fist, recognizing that this story had been carefully constructed well before now. He alone had resolved the disaster at shedding blood to do so, and the weapon known as the Flowing Cloud Sword was actually the blade he himself had wielded. A chill of hatred sparked in his gaze as he singled out the first person he would confront for revenge, Dane. He resolved to begin with Dane, determined to take retribution on each enemy, one after another. Beyond the gates of the Ding family estate, guards continuously marched along their designated paths, keeping a watchful eye over the grounds. One member of the group jerked his head to the side, his gaze darting across the area as he watched for any sign of danger. Chai and George huddled together beneath the cover of the wall's shadow, holding their breath as they avoided making any noise. George lowered his voice to a tense whisper, urging that they needed to leave because the area was crawling with guards. He reasoned that even if they managed to slip inside unnoticed, the appearance of Ding would give them away instantly. Yin Shei's gaze burned with determination as his thoughts churned. An intense desire welled up inside him. In that moment, he longed to end Dean's life. George believed that Dean usually remained within the confines of a powerful rift. The military kept watch over the high-tier rifts, only allowing people with the correct permits to enter. Being part of the family line, Ding's relatives understandably held those permits. Yen leaned in and spoke softly to George, wondering why a mere branch of the Ding family would require such a heavy presence of guards. George responded with a shrug that revealed his helplessness. He explained that the people in question were the offspring of legendary heroes and revealed that a mysterious rift was concealed somewhere within the estate. He explained that basic rifts were now exchanged through private channels. Those lacking influential ties often found themselves excluded, while Ding had the privilege of entering the family rift with guards at his side, allowing him to hunt monsters and gain experience whenever he wished. The regular students struggled fiercely within the school rift, doing everything they could just to survive. Shay sensed a heavy burden pressing down on him, a clear sign that everything around him had transformed during his time away. The environment he once knew had evolved drastically. In his previous days, top-level hunting areas were risky, but they had never been restricted by such rigid social barriers. George spoke with a trace of resentment in his tone, reflecting on how the majority of graduates typically reached only levels 15 to 20. He noted that without securing employment connected to rifts, a person's level would simply stop increasing. At the same time, due to ongoing conflicts within the family, the guards stationed at the Ding estate typically possess skills around level 30. In order to access more advanced hunting areas, most people choose to sign up for enlistment. They face tough tests in order to become members of guild squads or enroll in military schools. Came to a sudden understanding. Those who held greater wealth and influence advanced at a much quicker pace. George continued to press him to surrender, pointing out the overwhelming difference in their abilities. He reminded him that no matter how strong he had become, there was no way he could overcome the guards. Yen agreed silently, recognizing the truth in George's words. At his present level of power, defeating the famed hero was impossible, and reaching the well-guarded king was even further beyond his abilities. Remained determined, unwilling to surrender so quickly. He understood that scouts at around level 30 possessed only limited detection abilities. Techniques such as Hawkeye, heightened hearing, or using a rat familiar would never be enough to monitor the entire estate. This dungeon lacked the danger of higher-ranked ones, so the guards tended to let their guard down. After carefully assessing the circumstances, he realized they actually had a good opportunity to sneak inside. The defenses surrounding this place were full of weaknesses, a sharp contrast to the nearly flawless security George remembered from the top-tier dungeons in his previous life. Despite these obvious gaps, uncertainty lingered in George's mind. He realized that even if they managed to enter, the rift was private. Should anything happen to them inside, their fate would remain a secret, lost to everyone outside. Shay and their companions seized the collar firmly, their voices dropping to a tense whisper as they questioned whether the other truly wished to alter their destiny. The speaker revealed that the boy was the great-grandson of Joe Ben. The responsibility for altering the course of the family's destiny rested solely on their shoulders. No mysterious future would step in to make things different. His voice grew firm as he resolved not to let this opportunity slip away. George paused in quiet contemplation for several moments before he eventually trailed after the others, raised a hand to signal everyone to be quiet, her eyes sweeping over the surroundings as she searched for any trace of summoned scouts, but found none. With effortless skill, the pair leapt over the wall together. George's breath caught in his throat as he noticed the luminous cracks stretching beneath him. He wondered if he had stumbled upon a hidden dungeon deep underground. He quietly noted to himself that this creature possessed greater strength than the one he had encountered near the river. However, it appeared that the family's guards had already eliminated nearly all of the monsters inside. Gestured toward the last two creatures, silently indicating that George should handle them. George's face lost all its color as he stared in disbelief, thinking there was no chance he could take on opponents like those. A deep sense of regret overwhelmed him as he realized he should never have paid attention to wild ideas. At that moment, his only wish was to return home. Yin Chai, with a steady voice, encouraged George to defend himself. Overcome with fear, George let out a terrified scream, but even though his attempts were awkward and unskilled, he managed to avoid getting seriously hurt. Yin Chai's gaze sparkled with recognition. He could see that the boy truly possessed talent, though it was clear the boy struggled to believe in himself. Despite the apparent disorder in his actions, he managed to keep his health almost untouched, just as George appeared to be on the verge of losing his balance. Surged ahead, his sword glinting in the light. With a swift, practiced swing, he felled both creatures, and a subtle grin appeared on his face. At that moment, he recognized that the descendant of his longtime companion had begun his journey. George gazed inwardly with astonishment, his mouth falling open in disbelief. He had advanced to the next level, spoke in a composed manner, clarifying that experience points were allocated based on how much each person contributed. Those who chose not to participate in the fight would only receive a minimal portion. While he continued to talk, an old, gleaming sword materialized in his grasp. He observed George's swift movements during the fight and grew curious about how George had allocated his stat points. As George scratched his head, he explained that he had divided his points equally among all categories, leaving spirit as the only exception. His brow furrowed as she considered how shield bearers typically paid little attention to agility. George's smile was tinged with resentment as he thought about his choices. He knew that if he hadn't invested in agility, none of his classmates would have wanted him on their team. After all, nobody wanted a defender who was as slow as molasses. Usually, by the time he even tried to attack, the creatures were already defeated. His face remained stern and unyielding. Despite her serious demeanor, she understood the importance of considering the future. She knew that to pursue advancement classes beyond level 60, one always needed to meet specific stat requirements. Bastion Fortress, for instance, required a minimum of 60 endurance and 90 defense in order to be eligible. George gave a casual shrug, considering how rare it was for anyone to reach level 50, much less 60. Achieving such a feat seemed like an S-class dream, far beyond what most could hope for. Yin interrupted with a resolute tone, insisting that it was time for him to set his sights on reaching S-class. Despite everything, he understood that he had to focus on his own progress as well. The support class had been able to change the course of the battle solely because of his secret ability, Mirror World. He accessed his system interface and discovered, to his astonishment, that Mirror World had an upgrade option. Soon after, a series of system notifications echoed in his thoughts. He had obtained a shadow-type monster soul, which immediately began transforming into Mirror World essence. A creature burst out of the shadows, its form menacing, reacted instantly, sidestepping with agile precision. Her sword gleamed in the faint light as she struck, severing the monster's head in one swift, flawless motion. He brought his foot down with force, smashing another zombie's skull beneath his heel. The red glow surrounding him vanished as the energy faded away. His temporary advantage from the concealed blade had come to an end. He watched the snarling ghoul blocking his path, and reminded himself that while held immense power, it lacked the endurance needed for drawn-out battles. His energy faded quickly, and he realized there was no use in going any further. Despite everything, a subtle smile appeared on his face. Completing just this one rift run had advanced him by 2 entire levels. Now at level 17, his progress far surpassed that of a typical class holder. Crouched to gather the items that had fallen, a jolt of fear surged in his chest, and every instinct within him warned of imminent peril. Without hesitation, he ducked behind a large rock and held his breath, trying to remain unseen. George moved forward with caution, his voice trembling as he quietly noted that the patrols were becoming more frequent. With the number of monsters dwindling, the danger continued to rise. Chai gave a quick nod, feeling the strain as he tried to handle everything at the same time, battling fierce creatures, keeping an eye on the patrol routes, and making sure his trick blade was powered up at the right moment. The pressure was mounting, and even someone as skilled as he was found it overwhelming. He leafed through the freshly acquired skill book with a furrowed brow, discovering a technique called air brick. Following the mirror reversal, the spell transformed into Phantom Brick, which could only render objects as small as a brick intangible, making it almost worthless during actual battles. Although he had felt let down moments before, anticipation quickly replaced his disappointment. The prospect of Mirror World reaching its next level, now just 30% away, reignited his enthusiasm. He wondered, his eyes shining with curiosity, just how much stronger Level 2 reversal might be if Level 1 already held such incredible power. The character wondered if defeating the boss of this rift would allow them to level up right away. He and George moved stealthily toward the heart of the dungeon. As soon as they reached their destination, Shay's eyes narrowed in alarm. In the center, the Rift Lord stood restrained by luminous silver chains, encircled by guards clad in heavy armor, while mechanical owls soared overhead, scanning the area for intruders. Even George found himself murmuring in disbelief. The idea that someone had managed to hold back the Rift Boss struck him as unbelievable. Back at school, it was only the teachers who ever dared to approach a dungeon lord. The chains appeared to be made from top-quality materials, clearly crafted as advanced equipment. Paused to consider his options, but quickly decided against launching a frontal attack. With his current level at 17, he realized he would be overwhelmed and defeated almost instantly. He thought it would be wiser to take out the guards on the perimeter before moving in. There was a chance that one of those guards might have information about the location of the access passes. He triggered the power of Trick Blade. In an instant, his figure became a swift blur, moving so fast that the first guard collapsed in silence, unable to cry out for help. Forced him down onto the floor, her tone icy and cutting as she demanded that he speak if he wished to survive. The location of the hero's rift access passes was revealed to be the Grand Elder's study, where a frightened guard shook with fear. The guard admitted that a large pile of passes could be found there, and mentioned that these passes weren't particularly uncommon. The guard hesitated, explaining that nearly all the passes were for short-term use and did not record personal information. He pointed out that, without an escort who knew the area, anyone would be quickly confronted by the patrols. Yin's gaze hardened as he demanded that everything in the pack be surrendered. With shaking hands, the guard offered his lone skill book, his sole belonging, extending it toward the other person. At that moment, understood that the Ding family imposed rigid regulations. Any treasure found within the rift needed to be handed over, while the guards received only minimal compensation for their efforts. Excitement sparked in his gaze when he reviewed the item's statistics. The mirror reversal had transformed into a lasting passive ability named Moonlight Descent. Now, whenever he activated a healing skill, his attack strength would rise by 6% for the next 15 seconds. Guided by the frightened guard, quickly arrived at the edge of the inner residence's grounds. The guard leaned in close and warned that they needed to stay alert because the family head was waiting inside, someone who had already reached level 42. It was known throughout the clan that the Grand Elder and the three had all reached levels above 50. Most people would have been scared by this revelation, yet Yin Chai was already piecing together a daring strategy in her thoughts. He faced George and instructed him firmly to remain still, assuring him that he would handle removing the head himself. He quietly made his way back to the spot where the Rift Boss had previously been restrained, his eyes fixed on the gleaming chain, and a sly smile appeared on his face. Memories from his past life told him exactly how this advanced kind of restraint functioned. He unsheathed his time-worn sword and carefully guided its point into the heart of the lock. With a faint click, the chain, once thought impossible to break, fell open effortlessly. Before the guards had a chance to respond, the Rift Lord unleashed a deafening roar that rattled the chamber's stone walls. The monstrous being broke out of its restraints, its eyes blazing with wild insanity. The guards were thrown into chaos as fear swept through them. Some stared in disbelief, realizing the boss was escaping, while others wondered how the seal had failed so suddenly. Hidden in the darkness, Kai observed the growing turmoil with a subtle smile on his lips. Events were unfolding just as he had intended. He knew that the leader of the Ding clan would be forced to confront the rampaging dungeon lord, creating an ideal distraction for Kai to sneak into the main quarters and search for the entry passes. At the entrance to the inner compound, Ding, the second master, welcomed a visitor with a flattering grin as he held the car door open. He invited Miss Yen to exit the vehicle. A remarkably attractive woman stepped elegantly out of the carriage, her movements smooth and elegant. Although she held herself with dignified confidence, there was a subtle, distant coolness lingering in her gaze. As she approached the staircase, a servant unintentionally blocked her path. His expression darkened with annoyance. Without hesitation, he lashed out with a swift kick, sending the servant tumbling down the stairs, silently demanding that the man disappear from his view. George remained concealed far from sight, his gaze locked onto the gate, while every muscle in his body tightened with anticipation. A sharp noise of footsteps footsteps echoing from behind caused his heart to jolt with surprise. He turned quickly and was surprised to find Yen standing there. In a quiet, astonished voice, he wondered how Yen had returned so soon. Responded with a calm assurance that there was no need for intervention, confident that the dungeon lord would not be defeated anytime soon. His demeanor then changed as he questioned what had just been witnessed. George allowed his eyes to wander over to the servant, who remained sprawled across the floor. He quietly confessed that Joel was his uncle, his words shaking with emotion, and explained that Joel now worked as a servant for the Dings. Yen's face grew grim in the aftermath of his failed uprising. The Empire had twisted his name into a symbol of betrayal, using it as justification to massacre those who had stood by his side. The Zhou family, formerly his trusted supporters, had almost been completely destroyed, leaving Yen to wonder if enduring such survival was a harsher fate than dying. The surviving members of the Zhou family found themselves kept alive solely to enhance the clan's reputation for compassion. Yet, their continued existence came at a cost. They were forced to kneel, living as little more than obedient servants to those who now ruled over them. The Zhou family's elders had once hoped to transform their destiny. Their attempt to resist ultimately led to disaster. George's father suffered such severe torture that he lost his sanity, while his uncle surrendered completely and began obeying the Dings without question. After that, the Joss family managed to stay alive only by dutifully serving those in power, behaving as subservient followers. Yin's eyes grew intense, revealing that he could tell the other person remained uncertain. Not pausing to hear a reply, he pivoted and marched directly into the main quarters. During a time when the Empire maintained strict dominion over every rift, the only path to salvation required daring to defy the odds. Opportunities once lost often vanished forever, never to return. He softly explained that he was willing to offer help, but made it clear that any real change needed to begin with the other person's own decision. George watched the man walk away, his body shaking with fear. The thought struck him that the other man must be out of his mind. The Dings controlled nearly half the Empire, and challenging them seemed impossible. Overwhelmed by terror, George felt as if he could barely breathe. Yen glanced over his shoulder, realizing that his actions were more than simple rebellion against a few people. They were an act of defiance against the whole empire itself. The word hit George with the force of a sudden storm. He silently observed as Shay's resolute figure vanished into the shadows. Memories flickered through his mind. His father's wild eyes and his uncle's sycophantic smile haunted his thoughts. Within the Ding family's grand estate, Second Master wore a troubled look. He was certain that the Rift Lord's destructive outburst was no mere coincidence. It had to be the result of someone's deliberate actions. He wondered who would dare unleash such danger and what their true intentions might be. At the same time, managed to enter the inner compound without anyone noticing. When he heard Ding respectfully refer to the woman as Miss, surprise shot through him. The careful way Ding spoke made it obvious that she held an important position. She also carried the surname, leaving him to wonder if it was truly just a coincidence. In another location, the Grand Master named Ding Yi managed to overpower and calm the furious dungeon lord. As he stepped out of the teleportation gate, he immediately commanded his guards to encircle the inhabitants. He believed that the person responsible for freeing the boss was no ordinary individual and demanded his team locate the culprit. Once back indoors, triggered the Phantom Phase ability, focusing his power on the drawer positioned ahead. For a brief span, his form lost all substance, allowing him to pass through objects as if he were a ghost. He dug his hand further in, his fingertips grazing coarse paper and the worn edges of leather covers. It wasn't merely a journal that caught attention. Among the items, a collection of advanced skill books was discovered, with one in particular standing out. Radiant Slow Field, a skill capable of slowing all enemies within a 20-meter radius by 20%. Across from them, George focused intently on the advancing guards and gathered his courage to face what was coming. With a fierce roar, he sprang out from the dense undergrowth. The patrol straightened instantly and closed in around him. George bolted, sprinting desperately as every guard's eyes locked onto him. His only thought was to distract them long enough for Shay to escape. Peering through the window, observed quietly, a subtle sign of satisfaction flickering across his face. At last, the boy had managed to conquer his own doubts. He leapt down and called out to the guards beneath him, announcing that he had possession of both the chains and the skill books. Fury the guards, prompting them to abruptly turn around and pursue their target. Swiftly switched Radiant Slow Field to Radiant Haste, granting all allies within a 30-meter radius a 30% increase in speed. Within the walls of Ding Manor, Ding commanded his followers with authority, instructing the second and third teams to retreat and protect the Rift Lord. As his his gaze shifted toward Yin, Ding noticed something unexpected. Yin was not attempting to escape. Instead, he was charging directly toward the heart of the action. Had intended for this outcome all along. The fact that every guard had been sent out suggested the Rift Lord was already under control and likely weakened to the point where its health was nearly gone. If the creature was destroyed immediately, there was a good chance that Mirror World would advance to the next level. The teleport gate shimmered in front of, and determination lit up in her gaze. Most of his stat points had been invested in agility, allowing him to move much faster than the average guard. The prowlers and archers struggled to match his swift pace, managing to follow him only with great difficulty. Upon reaching the core, he saw that his predictions were correct. The Rift Lord, known for his insatiable appetite and once a powerful paladin, was held in place by glowing runes. According to the status bar, the creature's abilities were greatly weakened. The guards had locked it away with these seals to stop it from causing any more destruction. A chill flickered across lips as she smiled, sensing that this was the moment when it was at its most vulnerable. The guards eventually managed to close the distance and reach their target. With his palm raised, he unleashed a surge of purple energy that erupted in a sudden explosion. The guard let out a startled shout as status windows indicating confusion appeared above each person's head. Among them, a mage, overtaken by the bewildering effect, helplessly unleashed spells against his own allies, released a quiet, derisive chuckle, showing his lack of surprise. After his demise, Blue Star had remained tranquil for many years. The so-called experts before him, despite their impressive ranks, clearly lacked authentic battle experience. Their actions appeared refined, yet they lacked any true vitality. A surge of violet light flashed where he stood, his form slicing through the turmoil with ghost-like speed. Right when he neared the dungeon lord, a fierce wave of energy slammed into his path. It was Ding Yi, the Grand Master, who had entered the battle. The challenger taunted his opponent, eager to test their strength, as he bellowed and brought his axe crashing downward. Faced the attack with composure, lifting his dagger to deflect the strike. A glowing, purple chain of energy twisted around his hand. Even without the complete attribute enhancement, its strength matched that of a level 60 artifact. He spun with precision, channeling the energy of Ding and Yi's strike into a powerful downward motion. The explosion struck the ceiling formation on the earth, breaking apart the mystical symbols with a deafening noise. Touched down gracefully in front of the dungeon lord, a sly grin spreading across his face as he expressed his gratitude to Master Ding. A brilliant stream of violet energy shot out from his fingers, slicing cleanly through the enormous beast's form. The system displayed a message announcing the dungeon lord, though weakened, had been defeated. The artifact, a living relic, had reached a new milestone, advancing to level 20. The display showed that the mirror world had advanced, now standing at level 2. Dingy shook with anger, his eyes wide and filled with shock, remained calm, and expertly navigated the tap-to-skill interface. In a flash, a wave of purple energy knocked Ding Yi's axe out of his grasp. The guards stood paralyzed with surprise, as disappeared from their sight without a trace. Space shimmered as the dungeon shattered into countless shards of glass and beams of light. Upon reopening his eyes, Shay found himself surrounded by infinite reflections, transported into the bizarre and mysterious world of mirrors. Yin cast his gaze over his surroundings, taking in the eerie landscape. All around him, spectral sentinels, nearly invisible, floated through the reflective emptiness, forever trapped in the repetition of their last, fateful actions. He dropped to his knees and let his fingers glide over the earth, feeling for something hidden. Without effort, a fragment of shimmering crystal mirror stone floated up and settled gently into his palm. A system notification appeared, announcing that the portable Beyond Mirror World had been obtained. Surprise flickered in his eyes as he realized that upgrading Mirror World to level 2 had given him the power to bring items from that realm into the real world. When he checked his list of abilities, he saw that only Phantom Phase and Chaos Thorns were available, while all the other skills were still locked and inaccessible. A message below the group stated that the Bass ability had not been acquired, so the reverse form could not be used. He quietly acknowledged the truth to himself, realizing that every ability present was simply a reflection of one that already existed. After mastering an ordinary skill in reality, he discovered that its opposite version in this world would become available to him on its own. The initial LV1 had simply served as a less powerful trial version. A sudden understanding came over him. He started to move down the list, carefully considering different ways to combine options. By choosing the more powerful reversals ahead of time, he knew he could avoid wasting numerous upgrades in the future. Without warning, the crystals all around started to shake. Green flames erupted into the air, twisting and shaping themselves into ghostly figures of the undead, each one cloaked in haunting, flickering fire. Yin Chai swung their blade in a swift motion, causing the closest wraith to burst apart into countless pieces. A new system notification appeared, announcing that a skill called Undead Pact had been unlocked. This ability allowed the user to bind a defeated undead creature as their own summon. The highest level of summon they could control depended on their own current level. His eyes sparkled with realization as he discovered that he could return not just with objects, but also with servants from this world. The timer displayed on his HUD steadily decreased, signaling that only 10 seconds were left for his mirror walk. Showing no sign of doubt, his body shimmered briefly before dissolving into the swirling reflections around him. As reality returned, the secret realm remained wild with confusion. The guards argued loudly, their voices raised as they discussed the odd vanishing act. Suddenly, a chilly voice spoke up behind Ding, cutting through the commotion and asking if the shouting was finished. The speaker reminded them that after pursuing him for so long, it was only fair for them to pay a price. While Yen addressed those around him, he gradually unfurled his hands. A vibrant green light sprang forth, spreading in waves from his palms. Within seconds, hordes of ghostly apparitions emerged from the earth, their translucent forms scrambling upward. The undead appeared in a flawless line, their empty howls reverberating as they charged at the Ding family's defenders. Dingy glanced at the group of wraiths, unimpressed by their low rank. He forced himself to remain calm, reminding himself there was nothing to be afraid of. Before he had the chance to complete his words, the front row's shields were ripped to pieces by claws as sharp as blades. The fallen undead erupted in shimmering green fire, only to reassemble themselves moments afterward. Witnessing this, the guards lost their nerve, and waves of panic swept over them. A sharp sound echoed as his face contorted with disbelief. It couldn't be real. Reviving again and again should have consumed an enormous amount of mana. He reasoned that if they kept defeating, eventually, his power would be depleted. However, appeared completely unfazed, his strength undiminished. In fact, the green glow surrounding him seemed to deepen in color and intensity, growing even more powerful. Before Ding could fully grasp the situation, had already disappeared from the scene of the battle. Beyond the rift, Kai landed a powerful blow that hurled the guards around George through the air. The mission had ended, his voice calm as he announced it was time to go. George paused briefly, uncertainty flickering across his face, but soon fell into step behind him in silence. When returned home, he opened his hand to reveal a shimmering access pass. The pass, etched with silver markings, emitted a soft, gentle glow as it rested in his palm. He quietly claimed ownership of his past, thinking to himself that all he needed now was a person capable of guiding him into the hero's rift. He sifted through the items he had collected, noting that the chimera ring was almost completely ruined, with only 6% of its integrity remaining. Despite the damage, the operation had gone well. A subtle, satisfied grin crossed his face as he reflected on the outcome. As an added bonus, he had managed to acquire 12 of Ding's skill books during the raid. As he flipped through the ancient books, excitement sparkled in his eyes. One spell would boost his critical hits and power in combat. Its counterpart, a reflective shield, would raise his defense and resistance. He felt a surge of satisfaction. With these enhancements, he could push his stats to new heights. He had acquired a powerful relic known as the Corrupted Knight's Armor, a Lord-tier artifact that radiated a chilling aura, thick with the essence of death. Now that he had completely mastered the Undead Pact, he gained full control over the army he had summoned. Yinchai realized this was just the start, judging by the equipment found on the statue. The individual represented had been an S-class berserker subtype. Confronting such a formidable opponent, Yinchai thought to himself with narrowed eyes, would require him to obtain a Death Knight of the same rank. He also understood that reaching level 50 was a necessity before he could truly seek revenge. George glanced around anxiously, wondering if anyone was pursuing them. Yinchai maintained a calm demeanor as he reassured everyone that they could relax, explaining that they had managed to lose their pursuers and that nobody had seen their faces, so there was nothing to worry about. George continued to appear unsettled, shifting nervously with each step he took. Offered a look meant to comfort him, acknowledging his youth with understanding. She then shifted the conversation, asking if he knew of any nearby rifts that might mark the place where a formidable warrior had previously been defeated. He mentioned with a slight grin that he was searching for a more challenging dungeon to improve his skills. He hinted that the type of fighter he was would become clear before long. George paused to consider the question, uncertainty flickering across his face. After a brief moment, he admitted with some reluctance that there was indeed one. The rift belonged to the academy and was strictly off-limits, making it impossible for anyone to slip inside unnoticed. Noticed the restriction and quietly acknowledged it, deciding that unconventional methods would be necessary to proceed. Later that day, inside a teacher's private home, set a skill book that glowed with a soft violet light onto the table. The man's eyes grew wide with astonishment as he realized he was being handed a rare purple skill book meant for a wonder class. He could hardly believe such a valuable item was being given to him. He hesitated, his brow furrowing with uncertainty. The rule about the academy rift being off-limits echoed in his mind, and he reminded himself that breaking it was simply not an option. After a brief hesitation, he explained that the area was only accessible to graduating students at the moment and were not allowed inside. If a student demonstrated outstanding ability, a mentor had the option to put their name forward. The speaker assured that they would try to help. Several days passed, and found herself standing in front of the rift gate, while a crowd of students swirled nearby, their voices filled with eager anticipation. One person expressed with excitement that this could be their final journey into a rift, determined to defeat as many monsters as possible before it ended. The crowd expressed their thankfulness by bowing, acknowledging that the hero's blessing had made this opportunity possible, something they knew would never have happened without his help. Yin Chai squinted, sensing that there was something off about the hero's speech. The teacher informed the class that the rift had been given as a present by the hero. According to stories, the hero had once battled at this very spot, and there might still be remnants of his presence lingering there. Yin Shei's thoughts grew heavy as she gazed at the hero's rift, recalling how this very spot was where the legendary hero had once slain George's ancestor. The teacher cautioned the students about the dangers of the high-level zone, and appointed as the leader of the group, let out a frustrated groan, wondering how she could possibly gain experience under these circumstances. The teacher sharply demanded silence, signaling the start of the rift. In hushed voices, the nearby graduates questioned the presence of younger students, finding it odd and out of place, grumbled under his breath, feeling annoyed at the prospect of having to look after two people he considered burdens. He shot a sharp look at and George, warning them to stay near. He made it clear that if they became a burden, he wouldn't hesitate to abandon them. Crossed the threshold of the portal and was instantly surrounded by an icy, oppressive force. Although the rift was expected to suit levels 20 to 40, the atmosphere hinted at a much greater threat lurking within. The group moved forward inside a tunnel, its walls shimmering with blue crystals. As they made their way toward a portal that radiated a violet light, a sudden gasp broke the silence as someone spotted Yin and Yin Yin. The observer wondered aloud what had brought them to this place. Some students nearby whispered to each other, wondering if those were first-year students. CS noticed their presence as well, and curled his lip in disdain, thinking to himself how two more had decided to join the group. His eyes rested on, and a sly smile crept across his face. The thought of her presence sparked a new determination within him, making him believe he might finally find the drive to put in some hard work. His smile grew broader as he drifted deeper into his daydreams. One of the armored teammates let out a scoff, clearly unimpressed. He thought to himself that those two were both well past level 30, far beyond anyone else's abilities. In his opinion, instead of foolishly admiring them, others ought to be pleading for their help just to keep up. Muttered her agreement with a sullen expression, her voice tinged with frustration as she insisted she was only making a comment. At that moment, and drew near, moving together in unison, carried themselves with the grace of royalty, exuding an aura that demanded attention. Without acknowledging, swept by and made their way directly toward. His eyebrows drew together in a subtle expression of concern. The woman was known as an important guest of the Ding family, someone with considerable status and power. The thought of why she would come to him was puzzling. He wondered if she might have known the person whose body he now inhabited, or if her interest was connected to Ding. Offered a smile, recalling how he had noticed the other person at the museum the previous day. He had been struck by their quick reactions and the unique quality of their voice. Paused, uncertain whether the moment called for casual conversation or a cautionary remark. She moved in, her voice dropping to a hush that stood out clearly, even with glass breaking all around. His eyes narrowed as fragments of the previous night replayed in his mind. The shattered glass, the startled cry that had burst from him, and the realization that she had identified him from that single moment. Carefully shifted the position of her intricate armor, its surface adorned with mysterious runes, and a subtle smile appeared on her face. She felt satisfied that everything important had been expressed and prepared herself, along with her companions, to set out on their journey of discovery. Zai and Yin Yin pivoted with elegance and strode off together. Observed as they walked away, her mind racing with questions. She realized the truth that she had known all along but had decided against revealing secret. It felt like an unspoken threat lingering in the silence. It was possible that had also identified them by the sound of their voices. The character felt confident that, unless the Ding family discovered the truth quickly, they would soon become too powerful to be caught. He let a subtle smile cross his face, thinking that since she had shown him kindness by offering a warning, he ought to repay her in kind. He raised his voice in a calm but steady tone, warning the others to be cautious because something about the rift seemed off. Stopped for a moment, her eyes reflecting a spark of contemplation. She realized that the observation was correct. Given her abilities, experiencing this kind of pressure was unusual for her. She dipped her head in acknowledgement, silently expressing gratitude for the caution given. The crowd began murmuring among themselves, surprised to see interacting with someone. They noted how unusual it was, since she rarely spoke to others. The observers were even more stunned when they realized she had expressed gratitude. Curiosity grew as they wondered about the identity of the person she had addressed. Several students gathered around with wide smiles on their faces, teasingly suggesting that seemed to know quite well. They nudged him to make an introduction, hinting that he might be unusually close to her. Showed no change in her expression as she turned away, silently signaling that they were about to depart. As someone prepared to leave, they let out a mocking laugh, doubting the pair's intentions to take on the rift alone. The person pointed out that the monsters in this area were no lower than level 20, warning that a single attack from them would be fatal. Lifted her hand, signaling for the others to allow them to leave. He studied the situation with a calm, detached gaze, reasoning that anyone associated with must possess considerable skill. Mr. Lee had warned everyone to be cautious of them, a concern that another person echoed with a note of objection. His patience reached its limit as he reminded everyone of their purpose. He insisted that keeping the location a secret was crucial, believing that the fewer people aware of it, the safer they would be. In his eyes, sharing the crystals with outsiders was a careless idea. He dismissed the group's concerns with a casual gesture, reminding them that everyone already carried flare signals and insisting they should just ignore the issue. His eyes followed as he walked away, his figure fading into the distance. A surge of jealousy churned inside, leaving him to wonder why someone so insignificant was allowed to stand beside. His mouth twisted into a mocking smirk, silently conceding. If the other insisted on acting like a hero, then whatever happened inside would be a consequence of his own choices. At the same time, Ding rushed up the stairs to the rift's entrance, his complexion drained and his expression twisted with fury. Two instructors quickly stepped in front of him, preventing him from moving forward. They questioned Ding about his presence, demanding to know why he was there. Breathing heavily, he insisted that a group had just entered, causing one of the teachers to scowl in response. The teacher confirmed this and questioned his reason for asking. Ding's gaze grew cold, a sharp hatred flickering within as thoughts of Yin and George filled his mind. He recalled Dane. Earlier, the harsh words spoken in the chilly house still lingered, warning not to create problems simply because the words had stung. Seeing someone at the museum didn't give anyone the right to accuse them. There were more important matters to focus on. There is no content to rewrite, as the provided panel JSON is empty. Despite her uncertainty, Bing remained convinced it was them. Her voice shook with anger as she insisted that she recognized the voices without a doubt. Let out a dismissive snort, clearly unconcerned. He believed the worry was excessive, confident that any intruders clever enough to evade his guards could not possibly be ordinary students. Ding responded with a calm tone, suggesting that if someone could demonstrate their strength by outmatching the guards, then perhaps he and his companions would reconsider. Until that happened, though, he made it clear that there was no chance. Ding Dan had heard enough. He brought his palm down hard on the table, his voice cutting through the room as he insisted that the conversation return to serious topics, urging everyone to stop wasting time. Ding could no longer control his rage. He seized his staff member by the collar, his eyes burning red with anger. Consumed by fury and obsession, he demanded to know if Kai and George had already entered. Deciding he would not back down, he resolved to follow them inside, no matter the cost. In his mind, he swore that his enemies would not escape the rift alive. Hidden in the depths of the rift, creatures made of glittering blue mana charged ahead, their bodies sparkling like living gemstones. Raised his weapon, crafted from pure energy, and unleashed a surge of violet light as his blade collided fiercely with the crystal beasts. A level 20 elemental let out a piercing cry as its health was wiped out in an instant, causing its form to break apart into a shower of sparkling pieces. Even more beasts emerged, their forms glowing with magical energy. Swirls of violet and sapphire crashed together in his midst, casting thee in a wild, dazzling light. A monster drew itself upright, gathering magical energy until a dazzling arc of force sliced through the air. In a swift motion, dodged to the side, the beam passing so close that it singed the stone wall where he had just stood. He ordered George to encircle SHIELD. Immediately, his voice sharp and commanding. George wasted no time, murmuring the spell under his breath. Two shimmering barriers of molten gold, each decorated with delicate, ghostly wings, formed a protective cocoon around, boosting her durability by 500 and her defense by 700. George let out a fierce battle cry, his encouraging shout energizing and increasing her attack strength and speed by 5%. Kai surged ahead with incredible speed, skillfully dodging streams of mana as he moved. His sword swept through the air in swift, repeated motions, landing blow after blow in a blur, each strike scattering fragments in all directions. He quietly invoked his weapon's power, causing a wave of purple energy to shimmer down the blade. With this boost, he sliced through a level 30 crystal eye beast, splitting it neatly in half as his attack strength surged by 70%. As the system chimed, the monster shattered into countless pieces. The message appeared: the player had leveled up, now had 21 free points, with 3 additional attribute points awarded. George called out the word as he lifted his shield, his face lighting up with the eager enthusiasm of a child. Now a level 11 shield bearer, he could hardly believe his progress. The sound of his proud voice bounced off the walls of the cavern, carrying both astonishment and joy. A subtle smile appeared on Yin's face when the memory of the skill books collected from the Ding estate surfaced in his mind. Among them, Surround Shield and Battle Cry seemed like an ideal match for George's physique. Holding the items tightly, believed he could handle even the stronger monsters ahead. He felt confident that his enhancements would truly help in the battle. He recalled a warning from one of the instructors earlier that day. A rare creature known as the Obsidian Fiend was lurking within this rift. The creature was said to occasionally leave behind a rare support ability, known as gravitational pull. His gaze sharpened as recognition dawned on him. The technique before him matched the one he had identified as crucial during his time in the mirror world. He realized that mastering it would transform how he commanded the battlefield, elevating his abilities to a completely new level. Beyond that, rumors spread about lost spirits, brave fighters who had perished, yet whose ghosts continued to drift among the crumbling remains of this land. Yin wondered if, after their demise in this place, traces of them could still be found among the tallest summits of the ruined land. Without warning, his eyes shot straight ahead. Deep within the ravine, a gigantic beast began to move, its form crafted from gleaming, shadowy amethyst that exuded a menacing energy, distorting the space nearby. Magical energy shimmered through the air in visible waves. The oppressive force was overwhelming, reaching even those at a distance. Shay clenched his weapon more firmly, a quiet realization passing through him. He was certain this was the Obsidian Fiend. And George arrived at the edge of the canyon. Within the Valley of Crystal Pillars, they spotted a pack of deep purple obsidian creatures roaming through the area. The number of adversaries surpassed all prior estimates, with every single one displaying signs of being highly skilled. Their formation had already extended beyond a kilometer, which was much farther than what typical monsters could cover. Yinshay wondered if they might be roaming types. Wandering monsters were an uncommon sight within the rifts. Unlike other creatures that reappeared in set locations, these monsters roamed the territory at will. Compared to ordinary animals, these beings possessed far superior strength. Back when humans lacked strength, every encounter with a roaming monster turned into a fight for survival. Several individuals had wandered past the boundary of the rift, causing calamities to spread beyond their confines. Despite the challenge they posed, overcoming these foes offered far greater rewards and experience compared to battling regular monsters. Observed the group intently, measuring the gap in their abilities. After assessing the situation, he surged ahead and launched a swift attack to challenge one of them. Discovered, to his astonishment, that the Obsidian Crystal Guardian at level 30 possessed an ability to heal itself without pause. Dense beams of mana shot out from the creature's hands. A lethal network of light appeared as the rays intersected. The relentless speed of their strikes left barely any chance to evade. In that moment, he realized that relying solely on his speed would not be enough to rescue him. She faced a serious disadvantage due to her low health and defense. Without George's protective shield nearby, she would have suffered severe injuries by now. Without hesitation, he called forth his legion of undead allies to aid him. Despite their strength, the skeleton spirits at level 23 were unable to endure the relentless attacks of the crystal monster. Luckily, the way they moved remained quite sluggish. Yen noticed that his health and defense were not increasing quickly enough. He understood that his best hope was to depend on the defensive enhancements George had just acquired. Approached George and suggested that they focus on defeating ordinary monsters to gain experience before advancing further. He guided George to a nearby hunting zone, one he had previously observed from above and noticed was filled with monsters, an ideal spot for practice. During group battles, the shield bearer consistently served as the foremost and most essential protector. George lifted his simple shield just in time to deflect the creature's powerful blow. The other characters positioned themselves behind the tank, launching their attacks from a safe distance at the back. From that moment onward, George invested every stat point he earned into boosting his defense. Equipped with the armor seized from the Ding family's guards, he at last possessed the resilience expected of a genuine shield bearer. He was now strong enough to endure attacks from monsters at level 20. From the sidelines, she offered guidance, instructing to sink lower, maintain a strong grip, and move the shield to intercept the oncoming strike. George carefully did as he had been told, managing to stop the monster's attack just in time. Unexpectedly, he noticed that the shield was losing its strength at a much slower rate than it had previously. Repeatedly urged George to stay alert for any further strikes. Although George prepared himself, he still ended up stumbling backward a few steps. Upon witnessing the scene, sprang into action, swiftly dispatching a monster with a single decisive strike. He calmly advised that one should remain alert for the opponent's actions, cautioning against using too much force when handling the shield and reminding to conserve strength for future defenses. The character remained vigilant, allowing their body to stay relaxed and flexible, knowing to tighten their muscles only in the instant when contact occurred. Lightly tapped George's armored chest once more. Standing just behind him, He reminded the group that he was present as a shield bearer, and emphasized the importance of always keeping track of teammates positioned behind oneself. With offering careful direction, their teamwork became increasingly effective, allowing them to defeat one horde of monsters after another. Reminded that when opponents have similar strength, it is skill and strategy that determine who will win. Once the last enemy was defeated and the surroundings were safe, discovered she had advanced to level 22. With this achievement, she earned 3 additional attribute points to allocate as she wished. Looked over at George, silently reflecting on how this session would increase his self-assurance and provide valuable practice in fighting techniques. George realized he had advanced by 15 levels and could not contain his excitement as he shouted with joy. He gazed down at the radiant skill book resting in his palms, his eyes shining with anticipation. At last, he thought, the chance to master this ability had arrived. Information about the book was displayed plainly on the screen. It was a skill manual labeled Shield Armor. This skill allowed the user to add an extra protective layer to their shield, greatly boosting its durability by 400 and its defense by 512. The book was marked as rare and required the reader to be at least level 15. Only those who belonged to the shield bearer class could use it. When the book faded away in a swirl of glowing specks, George realized he had gained a new ability, confirmed by a message that flashed before him. This marked the end of the Ding family's collection, as it was the final book he could use. The newly acquired skill infused the summoned skeleton soldiers' shields with a luminous green aura, giving them an eerie, spectral appearance. This added armor strengthened their defenses, equipping them with the resilience required to confront formidable elite monsters roaming nearby. At the same time, a group of 3 teachers reached the Crystal Pillar Canyon. Giant purple crystals rose sharply from the earth, and in the depths of the ravine, a number of heavily armored creatures moved about at a slow, deliberate pace. High on the cliff stood alongside Lei and Lei, their eyes narrowed with distrust as they observed the chaos unfolding beneath them. A large group of powerful wandering monsters had gathered, and the trio silently wondered about their origin. The sight filled them with concern, for the area seemed far too perilous for any students to handle. His voice tightened with tension as she assessed the situation. She believed that handling 30 ordinary monsters was within their abilities, but facing elite monsters posed a much greater challenge. Meanwhile, his face darkened with concern. At that moment, a bright flare streaked upward, cutting through the air with a piercing whistle, a clear sign that one of the students was in trouble. Made a firm decision to leave this section alone for the time being, insisting that assisting the students took priority. Although remained worried, she pointed out that the roaming monsters posed a threat as well, fearing that the students might accidentally encounter them. Agreed with a nod, silently acknowledging that she would remain behind to stand guard. Nodded in agreement, deciding that would remain behind as a precaution, ready to respond if any trouble arose. Before he managed to finish speaking, Kai moved ahead and cut him off, insisting that they would take care of this area. Kai and George then approached from behind the group. They suggested that the distress flare could have been set off because of the roaming monsters, and that it was possible 2 teachers alone wouldn't be able to manage the situation. The teachers appeared startled and apprehensive. Shay reassured them in a steady voice, pointing out that the monsters were sluggish and still unaware of their presence, so they would simply observe from afar. She insisted that everything would be all right and encouraged the teachers to leave. One of the group eventually spoke up, their uncertainty still clear. They warned about the extreme danger posed by the creatures and urged against taking any foolish risks. The warning was clear. Being seen by those beasts meant certain death. After delivering this caution, the group quickly moved toward where the flare had appeared. Could still hear the teacher's warning ringing in his mind, yet he chose to pay it no attention. With eyes shining with both anticipation and a hint of menace, he gazed intently at the monsters beneath him. Clutching his weapon with determination, a surge of violet energy enveloped him. The monster's crystal armor started to splinter and break, leaving the creature with no way out. The obsidian crystal creatures caught sight of their intended prey and released a swarm of manta ray-shaped projectiles. George wasted no time in deploying his protective shield, merging its power seamlessly with his shield armor to intercept and withstand the oncoming attack. The mana beams struck with such intensity that the ghostly green shield protecting the undead broke apart. While the monsters concentrated their attacks on the undead, spotted an opportunity. He swung his sword with swift force, slicing straight through the crystal armor. With one last powerful blow, he sliced the beast straight down the middle, splitting it in 2. The obsidian crystal beast, a level 30 monster, lost all of its health. Deep fractures spread across its body until it finally broke apart, crumbling into countless shards. When the system's chime rang out, was swept up in a wave of excitement. After defeating a roaming monster, he realized he was beginning to master the skills of his new class. Despite the increase in his attack strength due to the reversal skill, his skeletal soldiers struggled to hold their ground as the monster continued its relentless onslaught, showing that he was still nowhere near the height of his previous power. After Shay defeated the final creature, he reflected on how the support class's base attack remained too weak, wishing he could find a way to increase it even by a small amount. The creature collapsed to the ground, signaling the arrival of the recognizable system notification. The character advanced another level, noting with satisfaction the unexpected bonus. Encounters with rare elite foes consistently rewarded them with a substantial amount of experience points. A message popped up, signaling it was time to gather the rewards. Yinchai crouched low and spotted a shining new weapon among the spoils, a crystal that boasted an impressive 552 attack power. He quietly noted that this would make up for his lack of strong base damage. Now that the sword was in hand, the upcoming fight seemed far less daunting. There was still no sign of a gravity pull skill book, much to his disappointment. The chances of finding one seemed incredibly low. He hoped that with some luck, he might come across another group roaming nearby. Suddenly, a bright flare shot into the sky and erupted in the very spot where the previous distress signal had appeared. This time, however, the distinct color identified it as a Tier 1 distress flare, a signal reserved exclusively for squads led by teachers. On the opposite side of the canyon, set his jaw tightly and wore a serious look as he lifted his shield to defend himself from the advancing creatures. A cluster of students found themselves encircled by a horde of roaming creatures. The question of why so many beasts had assembled in this place hung heavily in the air. The monsters pressed in on all sides, forming a dense ring around the glowing barrier that protected the students. Tension mounted as it became clear that the barrier was on the verge of giving way, and danger drew ever closer. The rescue team gazed in disbelief at the overwhelming number of monsters clustered together, struggling to comprehend what could have caused such a scene. A man with dark hair responded that they were uncertain, but explained that they simply followed the signal in order to offer assistance. A bright flare had shot out from within the cave, suggesting that someone was likely stuck inside, unable to escape. Rescue teams had already begun their work, yet the overwhelming horde of monsters made the situation almost unmanageable. Despite the presence of every teacher at the scene, there still weren't enough people to handle the crisis. Someone shifted their attention to Xia and In, explaining that their assistance would greatly improve the situation. The sisters looked at each other and shared a smile, silently agreeing. Yinsha responded with confidence, affirming that fulfilling this responsibility was naturally their duty. Yinsha lifted her staff and murmured a gentle incantation. As she spoke the words, "Star Right Arcana," an enormous golden magic circle unfurled across the floor. Countless specks of light, shining like distant stars, streamed into each person's body, causing radiant auras to shimmer across their skin. Their spirits grew stronger by 2%, and their attacks gained a 20% increase. The crowd reacted with collective astonishment as awe and surprise swept through them. They all recognized the potency of this surge. It had to be the work of a spell at least as strong as those of Epic Raid. Meanwhile, Sha unleashed a surge of gravitational energy from the earth below, using pressure to hold the roaming creature tightly against the ground. On the opposite side, Yin Yin triggered her hidden strike ability, causing her form to flicker and vanish momentarily. Within an instant, a monster dropped to the ground, motionless and dead. The crowd reacted with a mixture of gasps and enthusiastic cheers, their spirits instantly lifted by the arrival of Sha, and hope surged among them, as many believed that with these two present, rescue was now possible. When Shay reached the battlefield, he assessed the situation and noted the impressive equipment and abilities of those already fighting. He realized that even in his absence, the team was more than capable of handling the conflict. He looked into the cave's shadowy interior, uncertain about what it concealed. The mystery of its contents lingered in his mind, and he wondered what force could possibly attract such a large number of roaming monsters to this place. He glanced at George and let him know he would investigate, instructing George to remain with the rest of the group. At that moment, he triggered Mirror Walk, causing the system timer to appear with 29 minutes and 59 seconds left. He drifted effortlessly through the crystal barrier, entering the realm behind it, a world made up of shimmering surfaces and infinite reflections. Every wall was a mirror, each one linked to the next, and he found himself able to pass from one to another without restriction. Despite his efforts, he remained uncertain about the way back to the real world. Earlier, after the Mirror Walk timer expired at the Ding estate, he found himself unable to access it again. As Yin entered the cave, the mirrored surfaces along the walls cast dim reflections that resembled human figures. Curiously, the monsters cast no reflections, despite the presence of lifeless bodies. It became clear that he was the sole living being with a tangible form in the mirror world. He moved further into the tunnel, where the reflective walls began to show a group of people gathered together. He spotted a familiar face among the group, a student from his class. It was unmistakably. It became clear that those individuals were responsible. They had likely attracted the roaming horde and set off the emergency signal. At present, they appeared to be secure, taking refuge in a tight corridor that restricted how many foes could approach at once. Yet, what captured his attention most was the enigma that lay before them. What force could lure such a vast number of wandering creatures to this location? Ventured further into a passage lined with radiant green crystals. Every surface around him, walls, ground, and overhead, consisted of sharp, sparkling stone, so similar in appearance that distinguishing between different routes became a daunting task. Without warning, his eyes narrowed in shock as he realized what he was seeing. It couldn't be, these were unmistakable. And the rest of the group entered the cave, curious if the mysterious crystal they had heard about was truly hidden inside, or if it was simply another tale from within the hidden realms. Crystals existed that possessed a uniqueness unmatched by anything found in the outside world. These rare minerals could emerge only in these secret places. For experts in practical trades, these resources held immense value, serving as essential components for crafting tools, accessories, and rare magical artifacts. The worth of these items far surpassed gold, outshining it multiple times over. He reached down and lifted a fragment from the ground, and in that moment, a message from the system materialized, informing him that this item could be brought back into reality. His eyes grew wide as he suddenly realized that this place offered a way back to reality. A slight smile appeared on his face as he realized that any reflective surface could serve as a gateway for him to return to the real world. The power he possessed seemed to hold hidden possibilities, promising discoveries for the future. He collected every nearby crystal, making sure to secure each one safely. After completing his task, he faced the shadowy interior of the cave once more, feeling his curiosity push him deeper inside. His eyes widened as she scanned her surroundings, hardly able to believe what she saw. Crystals covered the area in an unusual abundance, far more than anywhere else. Anyone who managed to collect even a fraction of them would instantly become incredibly wealthy. It was clear now why countless roaming monsters had been drawn to this place. Beyond the walls, chaos consumed the battlefield as the fight continued without pause. Lifted her staff high, channeling a powerful gravitational force that pressed down on the attacking beasts, overwhelming them with an unseen weight. Yin unleashed a flurry of attacks called Twin Blade Rampage, cutting through her foes with swift, gleaming strikes that flashed like a storm of steel. Next, the event known as began. An endless shower of luminous streaks cascaded from the sky, resembling a meteor shower. The students observing the scene stood in awe, amazed by the display. They wondered if every ability shown was of epic quality, realizing that these powers greatly surpassed those of their instructors. As soon as the pair entered the battle, a wave of relief swept over the students. They felt rescue had arrived just in time, easing the fear that they might not survive the ordeal. Warned the group not to let their guard down, reminding them that the struggle was not yet over and they still needed to escape. Despite her steady and composed tone, her words carried authority. The fatigue among the others was obvious. Yin Sha's lips curled into a subtle smile, recognizing that things had improved compared to how they once were. In a heartbeat, her face turned stern, and her gaze grew as piercing as knives. The students looked in the same direction she was staring and became motionless, stunned by what they saw. Emerging from deep within the cavern, a massive surge of shadowy creatures rushed out, moving together as if they were a single living wave. Every beast emitted an eerie purple light, filling the air with a chilling, oppressive atmosphere. It became clear that every roaming monster from throughout the dungeon had converged in this very spot. At the same time, inside the mirrored realm, observed as innumerable shafts of light bounced back and forth across the crystal walls, filling the area with a surreal and glowing radiance. He navigated the broken crystal surfaces with caution, weaving his way through a dazzling labyrinth filled with mirrored walkways and ever-changing reflections. He came to a halt, his eyes fixating on the looming figure that appeared in the distance. Before him rose an enormous crystal tree, its see-through trunk shimmering gently with a green light that seemed to breathe from deep inside. Moved forward, his eyes wide with amazement as he gazed at the glowing core nestled in the center. He wondered if he had finally discovered the secret treasure of the dungeon. The vibrant mineral ores scattered across the landscape served only as remnants of this world, while the crystal heart at its center embodied the realm's true nature. After ages passed and pure energies from the hidden realm gathered together, a rare creation came into existence, so rare that almost no one ever witnessed it in their entire life. As a result, these concealed treasures frequently possessed abilities that surpassed anything anyone could have imagined. Gazed intently at the crystal resting in his palm, a spark of anticipation lit up his eyes, and a self-assured grin spread across his face when a radiant system window materialized before him. The mirror crystal core stood out as a rare and secret artifact. It offered a lasting boost of 10 points to stamina and steadily regenerated mana at a rate of 0.5 per second. In addition, it lessened harm from light and electric attacks by 20%, serving as a copy of the prized core from the crystal realms. Gaze sparkled with excitement at the sight of a treasure that could enhance basic abilities, increase endurance, and lessen incoming harm. He realized its value was beyond measure. With higher stamina, his health would rise. A quicker mana recovery would allow him to summon additional phantom blades, and the added magic resistance would help him withstand attacks for a longer time. The real reward, however, lay in the 20% reduction of damage taken, a rare bonus, even among the most powerful legendary items. Uniquely, this benefit did not require the use of any equipment slot. Despite the treasure's immense value, it seemed odd that only weak creatures roamed nearby, instead of more powerful monsters being drawn to the site. SOY noticed an unusual stillness throughout the entire area. He dismissed the situation with a quiet grumble, deciding to activate the device before making his exit. Without hesitation, he extended his hand and pressed the illuminated use icon. A bright warning appeared in front of him, alerting him that taking or using the item would cost him 10 minutes of his mirror walk time. He realized that this action would use up some of his precious minutes. Eyes narrowed as a hint of worry passed over his face. Simultaneously, a deafening roar resounded from the distant end of the cavern, causing the earth beneath everyone to tremble. Cracks splintered across the cave walls, while heavy pieces of stone broke free and crashed to the ground. The whole cavern trembled violently, giving the impression that a colossal force was stirring deep within. Suddenly, a flash of intense violet illuminated the area as an enormous beast crafted from dark amethyst crystal emerged from below. The giant figure, clad in pulsating crystal armor brimming with sinister power, gazed menacingly at the frightened people beneath it. The onlookers wondered if this was the lord of the wandering beasts, but quickly realized it was something else entirely, a secret boss, more formidable than any lord.